site, and we will also be recording the breakout sessions as well. This is a virtual meeting, and so just remember to stay on mute. We'll probably, if we have to, we'll mute all and or individual lines as necessary. But if you're dialed in, you can use *6 to mute and unmute yourself or physically mute your phone line. And we just ask everyone stay unmuted unless specifically speaking when called upon. We will not be monitoring chat except to keep an eye on any questions for technical assistance. And so, you know, when we get to speaking lists and all that stuff, we'll go through it kind of compact style. It'll be asking for hands and names, which you can plug your name in chat. We'll get it on the list in best in the order that we receive it, but please remain muted until we get to that section. We ask everyone focus on the task at hand, and we will be sticking to the agenda. We may have to close shorten public comment down to stay on the agenda time frame because we do have a firm timeline to follow today and a lot to get through. We ask when speaking only one person at a time, and please provide your name when that happens so everyone can hear you, because some are dialed in and some are just connected virtually. And again, I already mentioned this, you can hit the raise hand function or type your name in the chat or speak your name when I ask for it, or other staff ask for names for the public comment and questions section. When speaking, again, please be muted. Identify yourself. It's fair to be tough on issues, but not on people or organizations. There will be no personal attacks, insults, or threats, and we will remove you from today's meeting if that happens, so we can keep on moving forward and keeping this a professional meeting. Listen to what folks have to say. We do ask that you speak and act professionally. There will be no offensive, disrespectful, or derogatory language, including profanity. And if that happens, we will consider removing you from the list today as well. So just please, keep it professional on your questions and comments. Shouldn't have any issues, haven't lately, but just want to remind everyone. We do ask for a balance of speaking time, so we ask that your comments or questions are, you know, we don't have a firm time. I may insert the amount of time for a comment or question, but please just keep it brief and to the point. If someone has already spoken to a topic, just reiterate so-and-so mentioned this and I support that. You don't have to walk through the list again. We are taking mental notes and notes as we go through this thing and keeping up with everything. And if you are not able to provide comment today or want to sit on it or provide more comments, you can provide additional comments through the WDFW public comment portal, which is provided, the link's provided. Let me do a quick check-in with staff. Anything else on logistics or the team's functionality for everyone?
For folks on the phone, I believe it is *6 to unmute and mute.
Great, I think we're good. So I will move us back to the agenda. All right, so we're going to do a quick round of staff introductions. We're going to hold on public introduction roll call until we get to the breakout session. Depends on the volume of folks, but I will say if we do ask for introductions and roll call in the breakouts, we do recommend and highly encourage and will come back to as individual if you're not identifying yourself. So please keep that in mind. This is a pretty transparent process, so we ask everyone to be on the same level playing field. So we'll do a staff. Maybe we'll start with Washington first, since I'm already speaking, and then we'll kind of pass the mic around Washington, then we'll go to Oregon. And I know we have a couple federal partners. I may ask for them to introduce themselves. So good morning again, Ryan Lothrop. I'm with WDFW, the Columbia River Fishery Manager, and I'll go to Charlene next.
Thanks, Ryan. My name is Dr. Charlene Hurst. I'm the Columbia River Management Unit Lead, and I see a number of Washington staff on the call, so maybe I'll kick it to our Fish Program Director, Kelly Cunningham.
Thanks, Charlene. Good morning, everybody. Kelly Cunningham, glad to be here. I think Kyle Addix is on here as well. I'll kick it to Kyle.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm Kyle Addix. I'm the Intergovernmental Salmon Manager for the fish program. I also represent WDFW on the Pacific Fishery Management Council for salmon issues. There are a couple of my staff here who have been working on the STT process and all the modeling for our ocean fisheries. And so I will kick it to younger, better looking Kyle, as he's known.
Thanks, Kyle. Kyle Vandegraff. I'm with Ocean Fisheries. I'm not sure who to kick it to, so someone take it away.
Maybe Erica, since she's been helping you out, Kyle.
Not sure if
Hey,
Erica
this
made it in.
is-
Oh, there you go. Go ahead,
I
Erica.
did, yes. I'm calling in from La Push. My name is Erica Wayland, and I am supporting Kyle on the STT. I work for the Ocean Sampling Program as well.
And all of the staff gets mixed in with everybody else in our teams list. I'm not sure if we have anybody from Region 5. I'll just let people unmute themselves and go.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. This is Bryce Glasser. I'm the Southwest Washington Fish Program Manager, Region 5. And I'll kick it to Matt Gardner and then Josua Holowatz.
Hello, morning. Matt Gardner, Washington Fish and Wildlife. I'm the District 9 fish biologist.
Good morning. My name is Josua Holowatz. I'm the District 10 fish biologist. Basins of emphasis are the Lewis and the Cowlitz.
All right, maybe I'll pull it back this way. I've got actually 3 folks in the room, staff with me, and they are probably just, it might be quicker if they just speak through my mic and they'll introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Cindy LaFleur, Mitchell Act Project Coordinator.
Quentin Doherty, fish biologist, your River Management Unit.
So that was Quentin Doherty. Might not pick up the audio that well. He's working on the Columbia River.
And I'm Beth Daisy. I'm the Columbia River Fishery Sampling Coordinator.
So didn't pick that up. Beth Daisy, Fishery Sampling Coordinator. And then we will probably have Tim Sipple coming on a little later. He's WDFW and also a TAC member. And I think we have at least one other staff member, Raquel.
Hey everybody, Raquel Crozier. I'm a special assistant in the fish program for Department of Fish and Wildlife. Good to see everybody.
All right, last call for any other WDFW staff members. All right, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and kind of round out ODFW for us?
All right, thanks, Ryan. I'll start, and then Chris, Tucker, John, and others can follow. I'm Jeff Whistler, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm the current acting Columbia River Fisheries Manager.
And I'm Tucker Jones. I'm the Columbia River and Ocean Salmon Program Manager for Oregon Fish and Wildlife.
John North here, a longtime Columbia River Fish Manager, but I'm currently in a job rotation as the Assistant Fish Division Administrator for Columbia and Marine.
All right. Anyone else?
Okay. Yeah, Jimmy's on.
Yeah, hi, Jimmy Watts, Columbia River Recreational Fisheries Biologist, currently acting as Assistant Columbia River Fishery Management.
Great, thanks. I think that covers state staff, and I know Jeremy Jordan, I believe, is on here with NOAA. I wonder if you could introduce yourself and then any other your colleagues that may be on.
Thanks, Ryan. Jeremy Jordan here with NIMS. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I believe we also have Tony Siniscoe with NIMS. Go ahead, Tony, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, Tony Sinisco here, No Fisheries.
Perfect. So I think we got us covered. As needed, we'll do additional introductions in the breakout if necessary. So back to the agenda. Meeting materials are posted online. We distributed best we could this morning, and it'll get out there. The recording of this meeting again will be posted. So we have the way the meeting is going to run. We're a few minutes behind already, but that's okay. We'll do a review of last year, and then we'll follow that by outlook for 2022. And you'll probably notice it blends a little bit of what we learned from last year applies to this year. And then within that, when we get this year, we'll first start off when we get to the consideration for 2022. We'll start with the ocean fishery alternatives, and then we'll go to in-river. And then once that concludes, so we're basically walking through the staff reports, then we will open up to the group for question comments on what was discussed and provided. And then we will hit a break. It's going to be a firm break no later than 11:40, because we have to shuffle around and get prepped for the breakout sessions. And we'll have 2 breakout sessions. Those interested in the recreational discussion will stay on the line you're currently on right now. And then, sorry, just getting a little echo, 1 second. And then we'll move on, and then the commercial folks with the link is provided in this handout, as well in the agenda, as well as the handout. Those interested in the commercial discussion will switch over, and we'll start that at 11:50. So that's our firm schedule we're going to stick to. And then we'll wrap this up by 1. And this meeting, we will not bring everyone back together like in the past when we were in person. It's just kind of a challenge logistically. But materials and everything will be posted online, and we will provide materials in advance as best we can for the April 1st North of Falcon meeting. It may be the morning of, or it may be the day before. No promises there, but we will do our best. Got a lot going on. So with that, just checking in with staff. Anything else on the agenda? All right, here none. I'm going to switch over to the handout. So give me 1 second. And Jeff, I think you'll be starting us off. All right, just doing a check, Jeff. Is it working on your end?
Yep, I see it. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so Jeff Whistler again here, ODFW. I'm going to go through the 2021 review, which is the first 8.5 pages of the packet included in the materials here. So hopefully everybody's got that. Ryan will be showing it on the screen too to follow along. I'll just dive right in. I'm not going to read through all of this. Of course, it's all here for everybody's reference, but I'm going to try to hit some of the highlights and just kind of reorient everybody to what happened last year, and get us ready to move on into thinking about this year. So start out with a summary of returns and conservation objectives. First up, Upper Columbia summer Chinook. The actual return came in at just under 57,000 adults, which was 72% forecast. And then moving on to a couple of fall Chinook stock, key management stocks here. Snake River Wild and Upriver Brights. We don't have the Snake River Wild run size reconstructed yet. That's a TAC exercise that TAC is still working on. But the URBs came in at 66% of forecast, just under 240,000 fish. So quite a bit lower than the forecasted expectation there. The total herb harvest rate for treaty and non-treaty in-river fisheries combined was 21.66% out of the 45% allowed. Of that, non-treaty fisheries had a URB harvest rate of 10.53%. And moving on to the lower river tules, the LRH, the hatchery management stock component came in real similar to forecast, almost exactly on 101% at just under 75,000. total adults. And then as far as the conservation objectives, there's a combined ocean and in-river exploitation rate limit that was 38%, and those fisheries combined came in just under that at 37.7%. And of that, in-river exploitation rate was 13.52%. As far as Coho goes, I'm just going to skip right to the top of the second page there, Ryan, and talk about actuals. There was a very large return forecasted last year. The actual return came in just over half of forecast, still a very good return, just under 830,000 total ocean abundance. The early-late stock split proportions were very similar to preseason forecast, even though the total abundance was about half. And then of those, just over 666,000 returned to the mouth of the Columbia. And similar to the Thule ER, we described the exploitation rate for Coho as a combined total aggregate for ocean and in-river fisheries. That came in at 10.58% out of the 30%, I believe, allowed. So quite a bit lower than the limit there. And of that, Columbia River in-river fisheries, including buoy 10, had an exploitation rate of 2.8%. And then as far as upriver summer steelhead, we're focusing in on the A and B index stocks here. These are steelhead that passed Bonneville Dam from July through October. The return was only 70% of the preseason forecast at just under 68,000 fish. That passage was the lowest on record at Bonneville. The bright spot there was that the wild bees came in above forecast. Still a low number, about 1,700 total, but it was at least larger than forecasted there. We don't have the total ESA impacts fully calculated yet, but as far as we have got so far, it looks like the wild A's will have an impact rate of less than 1% of the 2% allowed for fall season fisheries. And for wild bees, it's going to be about 1% of 2% allowed. And I'll just note here that, several of these came in lower than forecast. I just want to remind everyone that we do have the ability to update abundances in season for most of these. The exceptions are LRH, Thule fall chinook, and Coho. We don't have the ability to update those in season, but for all the other stocks and species I just went through there, we do have the ability to adjust our fisheries in season based on real-time estimates of abundance. Then I'll move on to last year's fishery guidance. Pretty similar as the past years. We'll just run through some of the key factors and management criteria that we have to consider. First off would be Endangered Species Act limits that we have in place for sockeye, steelhead, chinook, coho, and chum. There's also the USV Oregon Management Agreement, the current 10-year agreement, the 2018 through 27 agreement is in effect, and that describes allowable harvest rates and sharing between treaty and non-treaty in-river fisheries. And in addition, we've got guidance from both Fish and Wildlife Commissions from both states, Oregon and Washington. And let's see, we get into a little bit of detail here because not all of the guidance is currently concurrent. So we've had to deal with that this year. We had some issues last year we had to deal with as well, but we were able to have the directors talk and negotiate relative to the summer chinook allocations. We ended up managing fisheries based on an 80% allocation to recreational fisheries and 20% to commercial for the in-river fisheries downstream of Priest Rapids Dam. As far as sockeye goes, the guidance is not concurrent, was not concurrent last year. Oregon's rule specifies an 80-20 recreational, commercial fishery sharing, while Washington's policy indicates a 70-30 split. Therefore, we managed the fisheries last year using a 70% allocation to recreational and 20% to commercial, leaving 10% unallocated. As far as fall Chinook go, for both the LRH and URB or Snake River wild stocks, Commission guidance specifies that no more than 70% of the allowable ESA impacts on the most constraining stock go to recreational fisheries, and no less than 30% get allocated to commercial fisheries. And last year, a bit of a toss-up. It's always hard to be able to define exactly what the most constraining stock is, but last year we were working with LRH as the most constraining stock, and so that was the allocation sharing that we met the 70-30 sharing on preseason. Yeah, additionally, WDFW has a management agreement with the Colville tribes that dictates some sharing of Upper Columbia summer Chinook. Moving on to page 3, review of the fisheries then. A lot of information here and tables. I'll try to burn through some of the highlights here. We'll start off with the summer Chinook fisheries in river. And based on the preseason forecast, the recreational fishery downstream of Priest Rapids Dam was allocated just under 4,800 adult summer Chinook. The preseason plan for the fishery downstream of Bonneville Dam was to be open June 16th, the start of the summer management season, through July 5th. And then the fishery upstream of Bonneville was scheduled to be open starting June 16th again and continuing through the end of the summer management period, which is July 31st. Sockeye retention was scheduled to be open during the entire summer management period from the Astoria-Megler Bridge in the estuary upstream to the Oregon-Washington border upstream of McNary Dam. And steelhead retention was scheduled to be open through this summer management period also, with a 1 steelhead daily bag limit. One steelhead daily bag has been a regulation we've had in place for several years now during our summer and fall fisheries when steelhead retention is allowed. So as I discussed earlier, the actual summer Chinook return was lower than expected, but the fishery downstream of Bonneville continued through July 5th and closed as scheduled on the 6th of July. But sockeye and summer steelhead retention remained open through the end of July. And about just over 500 sockeye were kept, with 139 released in fisheries downstream of Bonneville. And additional catches of 2,100 adult Chinook were kept, about 1,000 released, about 1,000 hatchery steelhead kept, and about 1,000 released, just rounding here, from just under 29,000 angler trips. Now in the area upstream of Bonneville Dam, catches were 94 adult Chinook with 22 released, just under 1,800 sockeye kept, 4 released in that fishery, no steelhead kept, 2 released, from about 8,500 angler trips. And additionally, summer Chinook fisheries were open upstream in the main stem of upstream of Priest Rapids Dam, and also in some tributaries up there, opening July 1 through mid-October. Total catch estimates for these fisheries were about 4,900 adult Chinook kept, 2,100 released, about 13,000 sockeye kept, just under 1,700 released from about 30,000 angler trips. Then at the bottom of this page, we've got a table that shows preseason and postseason allocations and total mortalities. So this would be kept fish and released mortalities in the fisheries. And I think that the postseason allowed for the ocean fisheries. I believe that's an error. Those fisheries just, their allowance is what they take. So that's a postseason modeled estimate. So actual and allowance should be 100% those ocean fisheries there. But setting that aside, for both the fisheries downstream, the Priest Rapids Dam came in about 97% of allowed. Fisheries above Priest Rapids Dam were a little less, 86% of allowed, and combined, the non-treaty total was right at the allowed take for those fisheries. We'll move on to fall season, starting with buoy 10. Buoy 10 recreational fishery opened on August 1st with a daily bag limit of 2 salmon, only 1 could be a chinook. And we did increase that daily bag limit to 3 fish beginning on September 7th. And chinook retention was planned for the first 10 days under mark selective regulations. And then the plan was for August 11th through September 6th under non-mark selective. So any adult chinook allowed in the retention there. Coho retention was open the entire season, was planned to be open the entire season, August 1st through the end of the year. And steelhead retention was planned to be closed for August through October, as we've done the last few years. So now getting into those sub-bullets there, the results of the actual fishery. After the mark selective period, the first 10 days of August there, as the fishery progressed, the expected impacts to Thule Chinook were higher than we had modeled out preseason, and that did result in an early closure of the Chinook retention effective on August 27th. So Chinook retention only went through the 26th, a fair bit shorter than planned preseason. Coho catch wasn't necessarily as large as planned for preseason, which was based on that big forecast, but it was still a good season there, with catch being the highest we've seen since 2014. So the season total catch estimates are just under 21,000 kept Chinook, with about 10,000 released, about 37,000 Coho kept, 27,000 released, and just over 100 steelhead caught and released from about 106,000 angler trips. The exploitation rate on those LRH Thules was 110% of expectations, even with the early Chinook retention closure, while the expected harvest rate on Snake River Wild was only 80% of the preseason modeled expectations. Moving upstream then to the lower river fishery between Tongue Point and Bonneville Dam, we've got that split into 2 sub areas for management purposes. Those were both planned to open on August 1st. And the plan for the Tongue Point, Rocky Point to Warrior Rock, Bachelor Island subsection was for Chinook retention to occur from August 1st through the 9th of September. And then for the area upstream of Warrior Rock up to Bonneville, the plan there was for Chinook retention to continue through the whole fall management period, August 1st through end of October. The daily bag limit, both these areas, was 2 adult salmon, no more than 1 Chinook when retention of Chinook was allowed. Steelhead retention was closed the entire time, August through October. And moving on to those sub bullets there, then similar to what we experienced in buoy 10, this is going to be a common theme you're going to all hear today, is that the impacts to those lower river Thules were higher than expected, especially in that Tongue Point to Warrior Rock sub area. And both areas were closed in season ahead of schedule. The Tongue Point to Warrior Rock area, Chinook and Coho retention closed September 4th there. The Warrior Rock to Bonneville sub area closed to retention on September 7th. A lot of in-season management back and forth going on this time of year last year. I remember it well. We were able to reopen Chinook and Coho starting September 11th in the area upstream of Warrior Rock, between Warrior Rock and Bonneville. And then we reopened Coho retention between Tongue Point and Warrior Rock effective September 17th. And then we're able to reopen Chinook retention October 1st, when most of those tules had moved out of the area. And as planned, preseason party fishing regulations were in effect for all of these areas. Season total catch estimates for these two sub areas combined was just under 19,000 kept Chinook, with about 1,000 released, 5,500 Coho kept with about 2,900 released, and just under 500 released steelhead from just over 87,000 angler trips. Now for the fishery upstream of Bonneville Dam, that was scheduled to be open, as I said earlier, the entire fall period from August 1st through the end of the year. Again, 2 adult salmon limit, 1 Chinook. Steelhead was closed in the Bonneville pool from August through October, and closed September through December upstream of the Dalles Dam. And in this fishery, the Chinook retention season did occur as expected preseason. Total catch estimates, the top of page 5 there, included just over 5,400 kept adults with about 500 released, and about 5,000 Coho kept, 200 released, and another 49 steelhead caught and released from just over 20,000 angler trips there. Now moving on to the commercial fisheries, we did not have a summer Chinook commercial fishery again this year due to current guidance. The preseason plan for the early fall commercial main stem fishery was 8 9-hour periods in zones 4-5 during August. And the plan for the late fall commercial fishery was to start mid-September and continue through October with about 4 10-hour fishing periods in zones 4-5 planned there. And the preseason plan also included a tangle net fishery targeting Hatchery Coho in mostly October, started right at the end of September and continued through October. We had planned for 15 18-hour periods in zones 1 through 3 for that fishery. So as far as actual results go, the August fishery, the early fall fishery went as planned with the 8 9-hour periods in zones 4-5 with a 9-inch minimum mesh size restriction. Landings in this fishery were just over 21,000 Chinook, just under 2,800 Coho, and about 300 white sturgeon. And then in the late fall season, we actually had 8 periods that were prosecuted there, starting late September and continuing through mid-October. That was also in zones 4-5 with an 8-inch minimum mesh size restriction in effect. Landings for this fishery were just over 5,300 Chinook, about 1,800 Coho, and 88 white sturgeon. Landings for both of these commercial fisheries were less than expected preseason. The deliveries per period averaged about 52 during the early fall fishery and 19 during the late fall zone 4-5 fisheries. Ex-vessel value was $2.69 per pound for Chinook and $1.90 per pound for Coho during those zone 4-5 fisheries. And then in the Coho tangle net fishery, we ended up with 19 fishing periods starting right at the end of September and continuing through the month of October on a days per week basis. And landings in this fishery were about 8,600. It says adults, but those weren't, that's total. About 8,600 total hatchery Coho. There were another about 2,800 adults released from that fishery. 615 Chinook were also sold and 10 white sturgeon. And the ex-vessel values for this fishery were a little higher than the zone 4-5 fishery at $2.78 a pound for Chinook and $2.17 a pound for Coho. So next up, we've got a bunch of summary tables. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'll just kind of walk folks through what they're looking at here. So 2 identical tables here. This is the output from the fall Chinook model. The top box here is the preseason information, and the lower one is postseason actual. So you can kind of compare the differences between pre and post there. So for example, the expected Snake River wild impacts were just under 15%, 14.95% planned preseason. Actual postseason came in a fair bit lower at 10.45%. And for LRH, the preseason planned impacts for in-river fisheries were 10.95%. And actual, even with all of those restrictions that had and in-season adjustments that I talked about earlier, came in at 13.52%. And I will just note one error in here. It's in that lower box, the Chinook main stem sport mortalities and harvest. That's an error. It's been corrected in the model summary page on page 8, I believe. But that's not 37,300. It should be 50,695 for both of those. And then the lower box here shows by fishery total catch of Chinook, comparison of preseason expectations and postseason actuals, and then also mortalities of LRH and URBs, the two key fall Chinook management stocks we have. So there's a side-by-side set up there. As you can see, actual total catches were a fair bit lower than expected preseason. LRH was fairly similar, but big difference there in the preseason and postseason actual results for URB catches. Came in less than half of expected. Some of that was due to the decrease in abundance though as well. So then on page 7 and 8, we've just provided the model summary pages. I think most folks are familiar with these. The first one is the preseason final. So this has a lot more detail by fishery, by stock. All that detail is in here. And then on page 8 is the postseason model summary for comparative purposes. And then I'll wrap up with Coho here. I think we are not doing too bad on time. So I'll just wrap up with Coho. There's a table here at the top of page 9, similar to those Chinook tables where it lines out the preseason and postseason harvest expectations and also the exploitation rate. And as you can see, the total exploitation rate for ocean and in-river fisheries combined was real similar, just slightly higher than the preseason plan, 10.58 compared to the 10.13. And again, that was out of 30% allowed. And I think with that, I will wrap up the 21 review. And I think, Ryan, you were going to pick up from here?
I am, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So moving on to 2022, got a couple minutes to catch up. I'll see what I can do, and we'll try to make sure we have that half hour for public comments and questions. So we've distributed a bunch of forecasts and posted online. So some of these numbers will look familiar, but our start with Upper Columbia Summer Chinook. Our pre-PFMC forecast is 57,500. It'll change once we get our post-PFMC final escapement numbers, then that's what we'll manage to. But considering the current run size, Oregon and Washington policy guidance are not concurrent on the allocation between commercial and recreational. Much like last year at the onset of North of Falcon. So Oregon rule is 80% recreational and 20% commercial. Washington policy is 70% recreational, 30% commercial. Therefore, when we move forward through this process, we'll be modeling 70% recreational, 20% commercial with 10% unallocated. And if we get guidance, to get concurrency, we'll adjust accordingly. We do anticipate, even though the forecast is lower than last year's forecast, there should be some limited recreational fishing opportunity in all areas. And then the fourth bullet point there describes the commercial gears, and we are not concurrent between the states of Oregon and Washington. So therefore, gillnet is not expected to be used for this summer's fishery unless we get guidance on that. And then the other note, summer chinooks. Sorry about that. Update run size occurs right around July 1st. So that's kind of when we get our first snapshot at, which way are we headed on abundance versus what the forecast was. So that's just a key date to keep in mind. So moving on to sockeye. This year's forecast is just shy of 200,000 fish and is 64% of the 10-year average. Of note, the Lake Washington sockeye forecast is 19,200 and is below the escapement goal of 23,000 fish. So for 2022 fisheries, we will not be open for direct harvest of sockeye, and this is due to being below the escapement goal for Lake Wenatchee, which occurred back in 2019. Moving on to page 10, a little rollover sockeye section there. We do actually have an allowable non-treaty impact rate for the Snake River ESA component that translates into a total sockeye harvest of or impacts of 1,987 sockeye, total sockeye for fisheries downstream of Highway 395. And then we do have policy guidance, however, is not concurrent, much like last year. So we will be, until we get direction, we're going to be modeling at the 70% recreational, 20% commercial, and 10% unallocated. So moving on to steelhead, for upriver summer steelhead, and focused on A and B index. However, the total forecast, including Skamania, is 99,700 fish. Of the A index, it's 81,000 fish, of which 28,100 are wild, and for B index, it's 15,600, of which 1,900 are wild. Non-treaty fisheries are allowed 2% impact rate for both wild A and wild B during the fall season fisheries, so that's basically August onward. Given the poor expected returns for summer steelhead, fishery restrictions are expected to be similar to last year as we came out of North Falcon, so that I won't walk through all this line by line, but daily bag limit may not include maybe more than one hatchery steelhead if and when open. Thermal angling closures for the Oregon tributaries, Eagle Creek, Herman Creek, and Deschutes River are expected. Rolling block closures for the main stem and some tributary areas. And so for buoy 10 to the Dalles, that's August through October, closed to steelhead. And for upstream of the Dalles, it's September through March. And then we have some Washington tributary restrictions during the month of August. And then steelhead angling closures in the wind, white salmon, klickitat, and Drano reaches July through October. So that's what we had last year, and so that's expected to be similar to that for this year. Moving on to fall chinook guidance. Policy guidance is concurrent for the most constraining fall chinook stock, providing no more than 70% of the allowed ESA impact for recreational fisheries, and not less than 30% for commercial fisheries. And gill nets are allowed in zones 4 and zones 5. Oregon rule does limit the use of lower river alternative gear for commercial fisheries to 2 percentage points of the commercial allocation, and that is 6.7 or 2% for commercial allocation, and that translates into 6.7% of the commercial allocation. Policy guidance for recreational sport chinook retention seasons are not concurrent provided here. Oregon Washington policy does not provide this guidance, but just to note, Oregon rule has buoy 10 to Tongue Point with a season of chinook retention objective of August 1 through Labor Day. For Tongue Point to Warrior Rock, August 1st through September 7th is non-mark selective, and an additional week of mark selective, September 8th through the 14th. And Warrior Rock to Bonneville Dam, August 1 through October 31. And if established objectives for the main stem are predicted to be met, additional opportunity is provided to the commercial fishery. Moving on to the next page, under lower Columbia River Tule fall chinook, the pre-PFMC forecast is 73,000 fish and translates into a total exploitation rate, both ocean and river fisheries combined, at 38%. This is expected to be the most constraining fall chinook stock in 2022, particularly for the recreational fishery. Moving on to the Snake River Wild Upriver Bright Fall Chinook, the pre-PFMC forecast is 230,400 for the Upriver Bright stock. And based on the abundance of both Upriver Bright and Snake River Wild forecasts, the allowed non-treaty harvest rate is 15%, a limit of 15%. So below that, these are the forecasts and last year's returns. I won't go through that, but they've been provided back in mid-February. And I think the only note that's updated is we added Snake River Wild forecast in there. And as noted early on, we don't have last year's returns for Snake River Wild completed yet. So moving on to Columbia River Coho, the current harvest matrix has been in place since 2015. And ocean abundance, and that's pre-fisheries in the ocean, translates into 997,200 adults, of which 592,500 are early stock and 404,700 are late stock. Policy guidance are for the lower river natural coho impacts are prioritized to select area fisheries, main stem commercial chinook fisheries, and commercial hatchery coho fisheries, which is within the Oregon rule element there. And then followed by recreational fisheries, and then Coho directed main stem fisheries for both states. Total ocean and Columbia River exploitation rate limit is 23% on LCN, so that's a drop from last year's 30%. And current Oregon Washington policy guidance regarding allowable gears is not concurrent, and Oregon rules do not allow 6-inch gill nets, while Washington does. And under the other section, it's barbless hooks are required in the main stem Columbia River from the mouth up to the Oregon-Washington border above McNairy Dam. Next, we have the NOAA guidance letter. I want to check in with Jeremy to see if there are any elements he wants to point out in that guidance letter, but I wasn't intending to display it unless necessary. So Jeremy, I'm just checking to see if there's any notes on that guidance letter we should be aware of.
Not unless there are questions, Ryan. I'll try and save you some time. So in terms of anyone having questions, I can answer those, but I think it's fairly self-explanatory, particularly for inside Columbia River fisheries.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate that. And yet we can pull it back up if necessary, and we'll keep you ready for questions if they do come up. All right, so moving on to the next section, considerations for 2022 fisheries. We're going to start with the ocean fishery alternatives. And so Kyle, both Kyles, I guess, could be on point on this one. Would you like me to display, or is it something that's pretty easy to just share some numbers of where we landed for ocean alternatives?
If you've got the file open, you may as well put it up, or I can steal the screen from you and do it.
Okay, I should be able to do it. So give me 1 second.
And I'll start talking while you look for it, Ryan. So the PFMC adopted ocean alternatives for fisheries off the West Coast yesterday morning in San Jose. The document that Ryan included in the distribution materials for this meeting just includes the North of Falcon fisheries. So I'll just speak a little bit to those. The Chinook quotas and the options were 65,000, 60,000, and 53,000. The Coho quotas were 210,000, 185,000, and 160,000. This is the first year in a few where we've had good forecast for both the Columbia River and coastal Washington stocks. The past 2 years, our alternative 3 has actually been no ocean fishing. So it's nice to have forecasts that let us plan some fisheries in all 3 alternatives. We also have sort of deviated in recent years from the council's salmon fishery management plan, which spells out allocations between commercial and recreational fisheries, as well as quotas for the recreational fishery between ports. This is the first year in a few where everything's allocated according to the plan with no deviations or trades or anything like that. Won't say much about the commercial troll fisheries. They have just ranges of splitting of the Chinook quotas between the spring fishery and the summer fishery and the options. They also have landing and possession weekly limits that step down as the quotas decrease, both for chinook in the spring season and coho in the summer season. The recreational fisheries are they match pretty well in the alternatives. In the first alternative, all 4 ocean sub areas would open on June 18th and go through September 30th, or until one of the quotas or guidelines was attained. And alternative 2, all 4 areas would open on June 25th through September 30th, or until a quota was attained. And alternative 3, there's a little bit of a mix. Areas 3 and 4, La Push and Nia Bay, would open on June 18th through September 18th. And Westport in the Columbia River area would open June 26th through September 18th. All of the rec alternatives are open 7 days a week, with the exception of Westport, and alternative 3 is open 5 days per week. So that's kind of a whirlwind summary, but happy to answer any questions when we get to that point, Ryan.
Thanks, Kyle. I guess I want to maybe just see if John, I can't remember if Chris is on or not, if there's any South of Falcon updates, or they can just take questions if they come up.
Yeah, this is John. Not too much. There was some impacts in the troll fishery south of Falcon for LCN or Thule natural tules that had to be dealt with, and some cuts were made and trying to tone that down. But we're, as Kyle said, we're still hovering above the cutoff. So that's all.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Kyle, again. We'll keep moving forward in the handout. So back to the handout. And I should make note that those ocean fishery alternatives that were shown on the screen, those are included in the packet of materials provided and posted online. So you can look at those for more detail. So next up, we have the Upriver Bright, Snake River Wild for in-river for river fishery discussions. The preseason urban Snake River Wild forecasts are over the 15% harvest rate, which the thresholds are noted there, 200,000 for Upriver Brights and 8,000 for Snake River Wilds. However, we have to keep in mind the consideration of limiting impacts prior to the run update, because once we catch them and the harvest rate has to drop down, it's too late. Recent initial and season run size updates occur in mid-September have generally been below the final Upriver Bright run size, averaging around 80% the last few years. This last year's initial in-season run update overestimated the Upriver Bright run by 15% compared to postseason estimate. And then this table shows the years when we've had fisheries exceed Snake River Wild impact rates, but 2017 and 18 were those years. However, the last few years been well within the 15% harvest rate limit. So I won't go through all this in detail. We just wanted to make sure you had last year included as well. So moving on to Lower River Hatchery, the Thule impact rates have been exceeded 3 times since the current harvest rate rule was in effect in 2007. And Columbia River fisheries in 2021 were set with a Lower River Hatchery exploitation rate of 10.95%. Fisheries did have to utilize an additional 2.2% from the ocean unused in season in order to reopen once fisheries were closed. And so we landed at postseason at a 13.5% exploitation rate, which is a 23% increase from the preseason expectations. And last year's recreational fishery plan was not achieved. However, in-season management, as mentioned above, utilized unused Lower River Hatchery Thule impact rates from the ocean. The Lower River Hatchery stock is a constraining stock, primarily in the ocean as well as in river. It was a key discussion point this last week at the council process. Both in river and ocean fisheries will need to work together to share the conservation burden in order to get ourselves collectively under the to the 38% that's allowed for this year. PFMC 1, which just occurred, developed 3 alternatives that Kyle and John alluded to. It also included an updated in-river harvest rate. So where we land on the high option puts the LRH at 40.3, of which 10.1 is the Columbia River portion. The medium option that is 38.8%, and includes a Columbia River exploitation rate of 10.4, and the low option does achieve the 38% threshold, with 10.5% being the river portion. So moving on to the next page, given the forecast similar to last year and last year's in-season structure, last year's season structure will not actually fit given this year's constraints. So where we landed last year, if you try to push that into this year's fishery packet and where everything's landing, we will be, last year's in-river fisheries will push us well over the 38% limit. 2021 postseason, LRH-ER was the highest since 2008, even with our in-season closures. And LRH impacts increased dramatically from preseason expectations for the Tongue Point to Lewis River and the Lewis River to Bonneville areas. And so this table here is last year's LRH exploitation rate for each fishery. So commercial up top, sport, and then a total, and then a commercial sport different sharing. So you can largely see commercial came in under what we expected preseason, and sport came in quite a bit above. And when you're looking line by line, buoy 10 came in a little bit over, from 5.85 to 6.41% ER. Tongue Point had about 0.76 planned and came in at 2.31%, so almost triple. Lewis to Bonneville, 0.73% was expected, came in at just over 2%, so more than double, a 2.5 time increase. And then tributary sport came in a little bit under. So moving on to modeling for 2022, LRH will be the constraining stocks for both ocean and in-river fisheries. And as in-river fisheries are shaped to manage for LRH, we will have to keep an eye on this upriver bright snake river wild impacts and track those. Upriver bright snake river wild could be a limiting stock if the run comes in below 200,000 and or catch rate stock comp changes. We do have a concurrent allocation on impact sharing between the commercial and rec, so no less than 30% for commercial and no more than 70% for recreational of the most constraining stock. Recreational Chinook fishery season objectives, as described in the Oregon rule, are not expected to be achieved this year. We'll also reserve Chinook mortalities to cover recreational and commercial Coho directed fisheries, and Coho fisheries are expected to be robust and likely similar to last year. Steelhead modeling is not complete yet, but both recreational and commercial fisheries are expected to be within the allowable impact rate, and we anticipate recreational fisheries are expected to be similar to last year's restrictions. So last, for breakout sessions, right before we get to questions and comments section, we have a half hour built for that. For the breakout session, I just want to make note that the intent for that is to discuss the actual fishery concepts in order for us to collectively meet the conservation objectives as well as policy guidance, in order to get ourselves to a place of providing meaningful fishing opportunities. So that's where we want to really get in the nuts and bolts about fisheries. And then for the recreational breakout, we'll stay on this line, and then commercial will switch over. And the agenda says those breakout sessions will start at 11:50. I'll kind of end at that again when we close public comment and questions in this part of the meeting. So with that, I'm going to actually, I might keep this. Yeah, I'm going to keep us right here for now. But ground rules, just remember, stay muted unless speaking. Act professional, speak professionally. It's fair to be tough on issues, but not on people and organizations. Limit your time and comments. We only have about 30 minutes for everyone to speak, so we're going to have to stick to that and keep your comments brief and to the point. And so what we're going to do is we're gonna ask for everyone to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment in this for what was covered so far. And we will put you on a speaking list and I'll circle back to those and then we will conclude at about 11:40. So with that, go ahead and raise your hands and provide names. We'll try to get you an order of hands that go up. And if you don't have the means to raise your hand because you dialed in, if you speak your name, I'll add you to the list. And if you're on the phone line, you may have to hit *6 to unmute if you're muted. All right, I have Steve on the list. So when I call your name, I'm just confirming I have your name on the list, and then I will call your name individually to provide questions or comments. Again, if you need to raise your hand, you can actually scroll up to the top of the page that has kind of a smiley face and a hand, and there's a drop down that has a raise hand feature. I have Robert written down as well. Again, I'm looking for names of anyone that wants to speak. All right, I have David down.
Ryan, go ahead and write Robert Moxley down.
All right, I have Robert Moxley. Thank you. All right, we will go through this list, and then if we have time remaining, which we may, then I'll see if there's anyone else. But so I just want to confirm who I have on the list. If I missed your name, and then I'll add it. So I have Steve up first, followed by on what I see as Robert Guess. I don't know if that's Robert Moxley, but I see Robert. Then I see David Moskowitz, and then Robert Moxley fourth. All right, we'll go with that for now. Steve Watrous, you're up first.
Thanks, Ryan. I noticed that the Columbia River exploitation rate this year is in the range, well, let's say it's right down around 10%. And last year, if I remember right from your, yeah, there we go, 10.1 to 10.5. And last year, we started off at 10.95 and ended up at 13.5 by utilizing the unused portion of the ocean catch. So that tells me the river has demonstrated a need and an ability to use everything that they are allocated in the fall fishery. But which confuses me because the ocean over the last 20 some years has consistently, with rare exceptions, left thousands of chinook unharvested in the ocean, but yet either doesn't want to or is unable to harvest their share by using restrictions in the ocean, particularly in Area 1 and Area 2, by a reduced bag limit, unlike Areas 3 and 4, and also restrictions in the number of days per week, and which they still have in option 3 in Westport this year. So I'm wondering why we aren't doing a reallocation here preseason on how we share those Chinooks so that we can get a higher expected exploitation rate preseason in the river, utilizing those fish that go unused or unwanted in the ocean.
So thanks for the question, Steve. I might check in with our ocean staff to see if there's anything we have to share on the question about what the ocean's used over the past and where they are this year.
I'll jump in, Brian. This is Kyle. We are in a different situation this year from the immediate past, where it's been Coho that have ended our ocean seasons early in most areas. The outlook's a lot different this year. Can keep those fisheries on the water longer, but we're also trying to meet some season objectives in the ocean. And those are all kind of spelled out in the Pacific Coast Salmon Management Plan that I referenced earlier. Yeah, it's a struggle to nail both those quotas and know that we'll be able to run a full season and catch close to both those quotas, but that's what we try to do.
I understand that, Kyle, but I've heard that every year for 20 some years. And the bottom line comes down to is we continue to make the same management decisions year after year after year, and not come anywhere close to harvesting those chinook because of, I would say, overly harsh restrictions. And as long as we want to put those harsh restrictions in there, knowing that the end product is going to be the same as it was in years past, I don't think we should make the river continue to pay part of the price for that. And it comes down to the same thing, the old saying about doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result.
Thanks, Steve.
If you don't mind, I'll jump in real quick and appreciate your comments, Steve. One thing with the ocean being managed to quotas, we're never really given credit for years or areas that are able to catch above what they were allocated. And I'll just point to even last year up in Nia Bay, we were forced to slow that fishery down. And if we would have been able to let it run, it would have far exceeded what was allocated.
Thanks, Kyle, and I commend staff for doing their in-season management like that, but unfortunately, that still doesn't address my questions or concerns.
All right, thanks, staff, and Steve, thanks for the question. I guess maybe this is a good point to just, if there are ocean thoughts, there's upcoming meetings at the ocean hearings that you can also provide testimony at, so just kind of flagging that for those looking at some ocean discussion. So moving on to the next person, but before I do that, I want to acknowledge I added 2 people to the speaking list. I have Rich Sims and then Bill Monroe Jr. added, so just letting you know you're on the list. So next up I don't know which Robert it is, but I have Robert Guest, and so go ahead, it's your turn.
Yeah, it's Robert Sudar.
Thanks, Robert.
So I have a couple of questions. One is, do you have any idea why the upriver bright run came in so far below prediction last year when other runs seem to come out closer? And this year the projection seems down again, even though the ocean seems to be improving and other runs look improved. So that'd be first question. Second one is in terms of Coho. Do you have a breakout for the wild or at least the clipped and unclipped portion of the early and late runs? And I'd like to know, based on those exploitation rates, how many wild mortalities or unclipped mortalities those would convert to, since we know that it's not everything that's unclipped is necessarily a wild fish. But so I'd like to know that. So we do a poor job of harvesting fish in river once they get past buoy 10. Recreational fishery is not very effective, or gill nets or tangle nets are not particularly effective. So we're leaving a lot of unharvested hatchery fish on the table by not utilizing our impacts. So I just like to know how many fish those might convert to. And then the last thing is in regards to the 70-30 sharing. I hope you're finding ways to make those closer to what the policy guidance and your preseason plans are. Every year our commercial fishery comes up short on one or the other or both, and we'd like to see, hopefully in the planning, some way to level that out so that we are getting closer to that 30%. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Guess check in with staff if we have any quick thoughts to why the Upriver Bright Run came in below, and then the Coho unclip numbers there.
Can you clarify the mortalities over?
So we may have to come back to that to pull everything up. But Jeff, I'm just checking on, probably don't have a whole lot to say on that Upriver Bright other than just age comp, it's just age structure, what returns.
Yeah, no, I don't have any brilliant hypotheses on why herbs came in lower than forecast.
Yeah,
may have been over forecasted preseason, or I'm not sure.
If we knew, we would apply it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have to come back to those other questions when we can, Robert. So just letting you know, we'll insert those and bring those back to you as soon as we're able to. All right. I'm going to move us down. So I just want to acknowledge, I see Bob Reese's hand. So I'm going to add you to the list at the end. So, okay, moving on to David Moskowitz. You're up next.
Thank you, Ryan. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate all the data and realize there's been a lot of work going on as PFMC wrapped up. So still difficult, of course, to digest all the information, but appreciate the opportunity to have it in hand a little bit in advance of the meeting. Where the conservation angler is concerned about steelhead primarily, and even though the forecast winter steelhead is considered one of the higher ones, in terms of counting those fish above Bonneville Dam right now, that return is 74% of the current 10-year average, and only 56% of what we'd call the best 10-year average in recent past. In 2021, the summer run was clearly in trouble right away. The management framework is to start counting summer fish on April 1st. It was really clear that they were coming in well under, and since many of those early summer fish are wild, we think that it is a mistake to actually have the fisheries open at the beginning of the season when you don't really know how that run is doing, especially since the bulk of that early run are wild fish. So the fisheries that are allowed are actually targeting wild fish because that's the majority of the fish. And so our recommendation is that with this low forecast and the volatility in the prediction, that the season should begin with steelhead closed in the main stem and tributaries until the steelhead return past Bonneville can be confirmed to be at some high percentage of the preseason forecast. That would be a cautionary approach to not having that fishery start too early. We believe Washington needs to implement a cold water refugia and thermal angling sanctuary strategy. And there's 6 or 7 rivers in Washington that could be effective at protecting these fish when the water is warm, not just steelhead, but salmon as well. As far as Drano Lake, we see that the proposal is to potentially close that inside area. We believe it should be closed to all fishing. The bank anglers on the inside catch a lot of steelhead. It's a place where many, many wild steelhead will go when the Columbia warms up. We'd like to have that considered for a complete angling closure. We believe that the party boat rule encourages excessive encounters, and there should be a rack your rod rule that is put in place, especially with a lower upriver bright run forecast. In terms of the Oregon side, the Deschutes Thermal Angling Sanctuary leaves about 25% of that whole water plume unprotected. We believe it should be expanded to include more than almost 100% of that plume. Also, the timing of that area allows for the fish are really gathered in there still, and it should be extended to at least October 1st or possibly October 15th. In Washington, night fishing should just be closed as a matter of course. There's not enough enforcement, and it is too difficult to monitor. And with runs so low, all those fish count. Any non-tribal commercial fishing in the main stem should be daytime as well. If we're talking about tributaries, if you're trying to protect steelhead, you can't continue to allow chinook and coho fishing that as was permitted on the Deschutes. We believe Washington should consider a closure on the Klickitat for steelhead until or unless we hear that we know that that run is doing quite well, and there's not enough information that we can find that would say that the Klickitat summer steelhead are healthy. We believe that the season restrictions that were put in 2021, and we know that they were fairly robust even in the main stem to begin with, and additional regulations were called for when the run really collapsed. We believe that they did make a difference in wild steelhead survival upstream, and that evidence can be found when you look at the pit tag conversion rate. So these things do make a difference, and we encourage that a precautionary start to the steelhead season would be better rather than reacting too late. And we appreciate the opportunity to testify and bring these up, and we look forward to the rest of the meeting and the season setting over the next couple months.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the comments there. We got them jotted down. So again, thanks. So moving on to the next individual, I have Robert Moxley up next.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for the opportunity to testify. Robert Moxley, Columbia River Advisor. Comments today, kind of reiterating on what Mr. Watrous had to say. I've been a part of this process, I think 12 years now, maybe a little longer. And in that time, I've watched the in-river fisheries, mostly Buoy 10 and Longview, really take the brunt of some of the impact allocations. I mean, you know, Ryan, you said you wanted to find some reciprocity between the ocean and the river, but, you know, personally, I've never seen that happen. Over the years, I've watched Buoy 10 close over and over, emergency closures, because we've caught them faster than what we modeled as far as the restraining, LRH stock. And at that same time, I've watched the ocean open up to non-select any two Chinook, any two Coho. It has happened over and again, and we can't bring those impacts into the river until somewhere around September 15th, I believe. So, I mean, it's too late, really, by the time we get that opportunity to roll them in. So, I would like to see a little more fair and balanced approach at impact allocation. I think Buoy 10 has had the brunt of, and the lower river, the whole lower river, Longview as well, the brunt of the or lack of impact sharing, I guess. I don't think the ocean's had any emergency closures on Chinook anytime, in the last 10 years that I remember. I think that the ocean only used 65% of their Chinook impacts last year. Westport, I think, only used around half. So I'm just wondering why there's no mark select, Chinook proposals in the ocean starting out when there's not very many Coho, and then we could, maybe take some of those impacts and put, by making the ocean mark select in the first half, take those unused impacts and allocate them to the lower river. Just a thought, not sure why, it is the way it is. It just seems like the same narrative every single darn year, and nothing ever goes, nothing changes. I don't know if the system's broken or there's 2 or 3 people in Washington running the show, telling everybody how to do things, and no one's fighting for, the in-river fisheries. I'm not sure, but, the bottom line is we're consuming impacts in that lower river, in-river fishery faster than we can model. And so why aren't we putting some of the unused impacts out of the ocean and to where they, where they'd be utilized best and appropriately. So that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert. I mean, I'll see if Kyle or anyone else wants to jump in, but not sure how much we can dive in on this. I will say that we were Columbia River and Ocean staff are fully working together this last week at PFMC 1, and we'll be doing that PFMC 2 and pretty much do every year. That's what I can commit to, is we'll do what we've been doing, and we do work well together. But just checking, Kyle, anything now or on this topic, or if not, I think we heard the comment and appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't think so, Ryan. As you said, you and I have been in daily contact as we've worked through last week, and we'll be through the rest of the month and into PFMC2. Obviously, implementing March selective fisheries for Chinook in the ocean is a different beast than other places for a lot of reasons. We had some sort of trials of that back from about 2010 to 2015 or so, I believe, and learned a little bit from that. It's still something that's in our mind, but not something we're pushing forward right now.
Thanks, Kyle. And again, Robert, thanks for the question. It's, appreciate the input. So I'm going to move on to Rich Sims.
Hi, this is Rich Sims. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hey, thanks again for the opportunity to comment. It's always important to be able to hear from the public and express our thoughts and comments. Again, thank you for all the information and all the data. A lot of work to accumulate all this or put it together. So it's always much appreciated. I guess my question more is, I think David Moskowitz made some very good points regarding steelhead. I think I'd like to hear more about Washington's plan in regards of cold water refugia and where we're standing with that. We're kind of getting close to coming up this summer, and it'd be really nice to get that kind of laid out on what our plan is. It's such an important element, especially as things get warmer in the Columbia. I think we really need to be thinking more clearly about this. So that's really my big question or comment. And again, how do we get ourselves a little bit more in a proactive measure for steelhead rather than kind of reactive in some of our regulation policies on it? I'd really like to see us kind of be ahead of the ball game a little bit more instead of just kind of being reactive. And then I'll just leave it at that. So thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Rich. Appreciate everything there. I guess to note, we took a lot, and David also referenced it too. We took and intend to this year take a lot of precautionary approaches given forecast is low, and hear that maybe more is needed. I guess I might look to Charlene, because Washington is working on a report for cold water refugia, and see if there's any quick updates you can provide.
Yeah, maybe just a heads up for folks on this call. It is, we have been, as Washington staff working on a cold water refugia white paper. That draft white paper is available on our commission's website, and it's a topic scheduled to be a topic for the fish committee meeting on Thursday. I think that meeting starts at 10 a.m. And so I welcome folks to tune into that, kind of get the overview of what the paper is, and then take a look at the detailed write-up that we've provided on cold water refugia in Washington. And I don't know if Bryce may have more to add to that. I just didn't want to leave him out. Thanks, Ryan.
Nothing to add on my end, Charlene. I think you covered it. We'll be there Thursday and go from there.
All right. Thanks, Charlene. Thanks, Bryce and Rich. Appreciate the question and flagging that element. So I see Liz has her hand up. So Liz, you are now on the speaking list. David, I see your hands up. I want to make sure if we miss anyone else, that everyone else gets a chance, but I will tentatively put you down, and if there's time, we'll definitely come back to you. So with that, I believe next up is Bill Monroe Jr.
Good morning, staff. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking the time here. As always, with North of Falcon, and just like Moxie was saying, we've been doing this for a lot of fingers, a lot of years on our hands. And this year is no like real exception to it getting any easier. It's not. Matter of fact, you guys are finding ways through it, and it's kind of amazing. It's very complicated, very in depth. I didn't mean to raise my hand, but I think I accidentally did it. But now that I'm here, I need to go over a couple of things about, and first and foremost, you know, Steve said it, Robert said it. The unified message is going to come, and it's already here. I don't know if we're going to be able to work with NOAA or not, but that ocean is not using its impacts, and it's becoming a pretty common thing. You know, to sit every year out there and watch those coho, they're gonna get caught, and then the in-river is struggling with either mark select or shutdowns, or it's all there. But the ocean is consistently not using an ocean impact, especially the more north we go. So in-river and moving those, and I think we've mentioned it before, why are we not exploring the moving of the in-river impacts? We're not going to come out with any of like suggestions of what we want today. We're going to have an industry meeting, and we're going to come out with kind of a little bit more in depth of a unified message. And I think you'll hear that from a couple others here in a minute. But I think that's really important. And I'm actually concerned a little bit about the ongoing Thule issue. It's not going to get easier. And I think you guys made it really clear last year, this is not going away. It's not. It's either we're going to improve it, or we're going to continue to adjust around it. And finding the right way to adjust around it seems to be the only way that we're able to kind of get through this and make every little stakeholder happy. I really don't have the full answer to that yet, but it's like we need to do just a little bit more on this. So I appreciate your time. Like I said, we'll get a different message out here in a little while, but I just wanted to get that out there, that message is important. Well, thanks, guys. Talk in a little bit.
Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate it. I guess just maybe to help folks kind of think about this, every year is a different constraining stock. So there's been years where we've closed fisheries due to upriver bright, not Thule's. And the ocean, I think both Kyles have kind of referenced it. You know, they've been reduced the last few years due to Coho, and that doesn't appear to be the case this year. So it's always, every year is a little bit unique in that sense. I just want to flag that part. So move it. So again, thanks, Bill. I see Jeremy actually wants to jump in. So I'm going to kind of skip to Jeremy because I think this is some worth noting, and then I'll jump back to the next individual on the list, which Bob Reese, you'll be next. And then I have a Bryce and a Phil guest that I'll add you to the list as well. And just referencing, please keep everything really short. At the list that we have right now. So go ahead, Jeremy.
Thanks, Ryan. I just wanted to, I guess, ask a question to clarify that I heard the report at the beginning clearly that for preseason modeled projections, you know, we had the exploitation rate limit is shared between the ocean and the river, but we model the fisheries in a manner that allows us to look at their preseason versus postseason performance. And last year we were at 37.7%, which is under last year's requirement of 38%. And that was because the ocean was under its preseason exploitation. But if I am correct, the river was over its preseason expectation. So if the ocean last year would have achieved its exploitation, would we have been over the ER?
So yeah, I'll take that question, Jeff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if we would have reopened, we would have been over. I guess it depends on the time we close and if there are any more impacts coming in or what that would have translated into. So kind of depends on what we would have done, but we were keeping tabs on, you know, where the ocean was tracking and what was left. So the action was only taken due to knowing where the ocean was settling out. But yes, to your answer, if we would have kept fishing as we did this year and the ocean actually ended up using everything they planned on, we would have been over.
Thanks for that clarification, Ron.
Yep. All right. Anything else on that, Jeff? Are you good?
No, I was just going to echo what you said and just make sure that people understand that the in-season actions that we took late fall season last year were made with the knowledge and expectation that the ocean ER would be less than model preseason, and we were banking on that to take those in-season actions, you know, especially those reopeners that we did. So, you know, if that wasn't the case, we would not have taken the actions we took in season last year. So I don't know that we would have gone over. We always managed to stay within our guidelines, so we wouldn't have managed to exceed, you know, as a matter of course.
All right. Thanks. And Jeremy, thanks for the question. I think that helps too. Bob Reese, you're up next. And just a reminder for everyone, speaking list closed. Do have breakouts to follow up on stuff. Brief. We're approaching 11:40.
Thanks, you guys. I'll keep this brief. Just supporting some of the previous testimony to move some ocean impacts to the river fishery. It's been challenging to see most of the recent 10 years not achieving the recreational objective for in-river fisheries, both the buoy 10 and upriver in some cases. I wonder about you know, putting on the table the concept of a possible mark select chinook fishery in the ocean, if that helps achieve some additional opportunity for in-river buoy 10 fisheries. And I think you guys heard us as a unified industry last year to do whatever we can to make sure we don't compromise coho opportunity for in-river. It looks like ocean opportunity to be really robust, which is great. Some of us can certainly take advantage of that, but I just wanted to point that out. And let's see, look at my notes here. Yeah, I want to just make another pitch for the possibility for a mark select fishery in the ocean targeting chinook, if that has any application or benefit to in-river fisheries. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Comments noted. Folks, staff definitely heard it. So I'm going to just keep us rolling forward, but thank you again. Liz, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, great work, but we weren't able to digest this as an industry getting in an hour before the meeting, so we will commit to getting together and reviewing this information and come back with a consensus recommendation. Just a couple of ideas, you know, echoing. I think you're hearing some consistency in terms of looking at the ocean. I'm wondering what it might do to have concurrency with the ocean in terms of the fisheries, much as what you did to the area just above Tongue Point. What that might look like in the modeling in terms of savings for in-river. And then speaking of concurrency, I just want to note that our industry lost or is going to lose about $400,000 in direct expenditures from Washington's position on spring chinook fisheries. And that's really problematic. And that's daily expenditures. That's not boat, motors, trailers, rods, reels. So I expect those numbers to carry through the rest of the year. And we're hopeful that the Washington Commission can meet quickly and address this problem.
All right. Thank you, Liz. Definitely understand that folks didn't get a good look at everything. We had some logistics that limited turnaround from the council process, so it's kind of.
Oh, hey, no criticism, okay?
Yeah, no, I get it.
We'll get together and review it and try to come back with something that's helpful.
Yep. No, I was more or less just making sure everyone else was aware that we didn't have a day's break between the council and this meeting. That was our challenge there. So I'm going to move on to Brian's list. I don't know who that is. Bryce Guest is all I can see with a hand up. All right, I'm going to move on, and hopefully we can catch you at the breakout then. I see Phil with Guest with their hand up, so go ahead, Phil.
Thanks very much, Ryan. This is Phil Anderson. I'm a member of the Pacific Fishery Management Council. Appreciate all the work and information that you all have provided us here this morning. I did want to just speak briefly and can talk more about this in the breakout group about the ocean and our strategy about setting seasons such that we have a high degree of stability in the seasons that we do set. We believe that in the case of recreational anglers, they place a high value, particularly when they're coming from long distances to come to our coastal areas to fish, that having stability and having a high assurance that when they get there, the season is going to still be open, the regulations are going to be as they expected. And so that results in us starting out with a more conservative approach in terms of setting the season. We would much rather take in-season actions that liberalize the season, moving from 5 to 7 days a week, or liberalizing the chinook bag limit as an example from 1 to 2 fish in season. When we have assurance that our season length and that all of the people who have made various reservations in motels and charters and other things can be assured that they're going to be able to enjoy that opportunity and that their plans aren't disrupted. So that, by definition, from my perspective, means that you're not going to take your quota, right? Because obviously if you do, or if you try to plan your season to catch that last fish, you run a high probability of having to take in-season action that's more restrictive and places recreational anglers in a very bad position. So it's a little bit different approach, I think, than is used in other areas of the state in terms of how the seasons are structured. And I understand there's frustration around that in some cases if you're not taking your entire quota. I think the other point I would make is that obviously you've got both Coho and chinook quotas that are driving the fishery. And so if you have a very restrictive number of one species versus the other, it makes it really difficult to get at that other species that maybe has a more liberal quota. And just lastly, I'm not aware, and I don't think that the ocean folks have taken the position of adhering to some hard line, 5-year average or something like that in terms of distribution of impacts inside and outside. I think that's been, if you look at the history, that's been demonstrated. And obviously, if we don't take our chinook quota as an example in the ocean, and you do go over what's anticipated inside, you can use that as a buffer so that you're not exceeding the overall ESA impacts. So that's just a little bit more description and discussion around this issue, and look forward to the breakout session when maybe we can add a little bit more. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that description. It's helpful. So I'm going to close the comments. Close there. I know, David, you raised your hand. Let's save you for the breakout if you're available, or you can reach out to staff directly. I guess I'm going to take this opportunity real quick We do have future meetings, so feel free to attend any of these. It's included in the agenda on the second page, and there's several places you can provide comment and hear where things are at. But for this group, April 1st is the next meeting. Same time, 10 a.m. So just kind of point that out while we have the whole group together. And with that, we're going to go on a pause and on this meeting and switch over, and folks are going to jump into the commercial breakout, and Rec will be back on at 10:50 or 11:50. So not quite 10 minutes to work with, but I think we have to stick to that time to keep us rolling forward and get done by 1. So with that, thanks everyone, and we'll see you shortly. Hey everyone, just gonna make sure we have the right staff before we get rolling. I'm just gonna look through my list. I see Tucker's on, got Jimmy, just making sure you're both there.
I'm here. That's Jimmy, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, Ryan, you're going to keep recreational breakout here, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep, you're in the right room probably. So I'm just before we go on, I want to make sure Tucker's on. And we've got Quentin here as well. And there are definitely plenty of other staff, but for focused on in-river, main stem, those are the key staff. And then for tributary, we got Bryce, Poswell, and Matt. So just making sure we have the key staff on point. Ready?
I think we're ready, Ryan.
Okay. I haven't heard. Tucker, are you there yet? Well, I'll buy Tucker a little bit of time and just kind of get us situated. And then we'll really get rolling. So just look at the agenda. We've got 70 minutes, so we're going to end it at 1 p.m. No lunch break. Sorry, everyone. Hope you have a snack, coffee or water to keep us rolling. So we're going to basically have an hour allotted for the main stem Columbia River discussion and 10 minutes for the tributary. I know there was some reference to, maybe carrying some of that ocean conversation here. I think through Q&A, we can probably do that, but I don't think we were intending to go over any materials, but I just wanted to check with Kyle Addix if you're okay with that approach.
Yep, I'm still here.
Great. All right. Go that way. And so the intent is to walk through the handout in its entirety that's remaining for the rec breakout, and then jump to the Region 5 tributary handout. And then once we conclude that, we'll be able to take some time. It won't take too awfully long to get through, but we'll do our best to make sure we have plenty of time available. So I'm going to switch on over, and while I'm doing that, just checking. Tucker, are you on yet?
Yes, I am. Sorry,
right.
You caught me with a Frito in my mouth when you said that, so.
No worries. I told everyone they can eat. The only one that can't eat is me, probably. So, all right. So moving into the rec breakout, I'm going to go through this, and then we'll switch over to Region 5 handout. So a lot of this will sound familiar. We kind of teed it up. So this is the intent of this meeting, is to kind of develop some in-river options for consideration. What tools can staff consider looking at and bring back to the April 1st meeting? So I know folks are still digesting. I get that. Things move pretty fast in this North Falcon process, so it's not a new thing. But we'll, take comments here, look at the public comment input, and any additional comments staff receive via email. But that we will basically take what we hear and work with what our constraints are and policy guidance, among other things. So all right, I'm going to dive right into the handout. Can't see what page that is, but anyways, let me just page 14 if you're not there yet. All right, so for consideration for this year, starting with summer Chinook, the Upper Columbia summer Chinook allocation is insufficient to consider a full Lower Columbia River and fishery. That June 16th start date through July 31st due to the allocations that we currently are saving coming out of the council process with where the river mouth run size is. So that's for fisheries below Priest Rapids Dam. So something to keep in mind is, if you start June 16th, that's kind of on the peak abundance, peak catch rate, best time to go fishing. You'd have a pretty limited days of fishing opportunity. But if you had a slight delay start, that would definitely provide additional days. So just keep that in mind. We won't know what those numbers are till we come out of PFMC2, but we're looking for thoughts on that one. So moving on to fall season, this is going to be very heavily focused on fall chinook. So what we really have is a suite of tools that we know work to, kind of, limit our impacts on our constraining stock. And that's kind of what's provided here. It's not a recommendation from staff. It's just, this is a set of tool sets that we know should work. There's a lot more options out there. I'm curious to what you have to say, but we've basically taken what we've used in the past and maybe thought of a few other approaches and kind of captured that here. So, the easiest way to reduce LRH impacts is consider a closure or delay start when you have high lower river hatchery tules in the river in high lower river hatchery tule catch areas. Just one option that we haven't really done, but something to consider is you could start with the desired end date and work backwards up to the front end of the fishery. That's one. We've done it in the past. Last year was an example, mark selective fishing in buoy 10 to buy some more opportunity. In the lower river, we've considered days per week and have actually implemented that before. That's something that allows us to kind of keep pulse on the fishery and our impacts as we accumulate them. We do that in most of our other fisheries and the rest of the year anyways to some degree. So that would work here as well. Consider overlapping fisheries to limit the effort shift. That's something that, if we hear if that's important, we can kind of try to make sure there's some overlap to kind of provide a little buffer there. We've done in the past the sub-area closures. I think one example is that Tongue Point to West Puget Island with buoy 10 in the past. That's something that, we've done that could assist with kind of keeping our impacts in check. We do want to note, we do have Coho fisheries ongoing. So the buoy 10 Coho fishery, want to reserve some chinook mortalities for that fishery, given we have a pretty robust forecast there. But we would probably consider salmon on the angling closures from upstream of buoy 10 when chinook closes, like previous years, given the non-target handle we've seen before. So that's kind of just a suite of tools that we've done in the past that kind of rolling forward to this year for you all to keep in mind on your comments and considerations to us. But moving on down the page, we have this figure here. My mouse, there we go. So the gray is our total in-river, lower river hatchery tule impacts by area percentage point. So that's the ER, the exploitation rate by area for the sport fishery, 5-year average there. So blue, we know buoy 10 does need tules to fish, and so that's why you see it as the highest contributing rec fishery. But what you'll notice in orange and yellow, those are the orange is the Tongue Point to Warrior, and the yellow is the Warrior to Bonneville rec fisheries, that they've been pretty static and low, well below a 1% exploitation rate up until crossed into 2020. And then last year, even higher than that, basically more than doubled last few years, the exploitation rate. And, we all know that affected last year's actual fishery. And the only reason we could reopen was the ocean didn't catch, what their expectations were, and that allowed us to reopen. So if we had kept fishing and didn't close in season, that number you see there on 2021 would be quite a bit higher. So that's what that figure is, kind of lays it out. Moving on to buoy 10 on the LRH impacts. So figure here, this is just last year. And so in the bottom, you can see individual days. So we opened August 1st through, I believe the 10th was marked selective. So we were actually largely tracking behind our expected LRH impacts. And we're on par, tracking along pretty good until we hit about that August 19th to 20th window. And then you can see there's a big difference in the tule catch in our stock comp of buoy 10. So that's what this figure shows. And then we actually closed, I can't remember what day, but we already walked through it, was closed. We closed chinook retention when we caught up to this data. Moving on to the next section, I'm not gonna walk through the historical harvest rates, but just want to reference that we just do kind of show the, the first bullet point kind of discusses the buoy 10 angler effort fluctuates with salmon seasons, but generally has remained stable. When you look back prior to 2010, it has increased recently, the chinook handle, and then last year's information is included, but I think we already walked through that earlier. We did notice that I've noticed in the past, and last year's likely part of it, high temperature water temperatures in the main stem can result in a thermal block, which can increase catch rates in buoy 10, so that could have been a contributing factor. And then the final bullet point there kind of just shows how effort and catches transition over different decades up to recent years, includes last year. So it's kind of, generally speaking, everything's gone up. But moving on to page 16, this is another figure, but this shows just chinook handle, not mortalities. So that's, kept or released fish. So it'd be closed chinook retention, but it still shows handle thereafter. So there are some regulation influences in this, obviously, when we close, but this is the 5-year average daily handle. So gray is buoy 10. So you can, I think what's obvious here is you can see the different time periods where chinook handle, total chinook handle occurs. So you start with buoy 10 a lot more in the earlier window, not surprising because you're low in the river. And then tends to drop off when you get to the end of August. Next up is Tongue Point to Warrior, and then next following Warrior to Bonneville. I think we can pretty much say that the Thule catch rate is largely correlated to what you're seeing right here. So these are the windows of peak handle rate of Thule stockfish as well, up until you get into the late part of, you start getting to late September. They're definitely not much around. Those are probably mostly are all bright. The next figure for Warrior to Bonneville is basically the same information above, a slightly different metric, but it's just looking at Warrior Rock to Bonneville specifically, and that is chinook catch per day. That's the 5-year average. So it's not handle, it's the harvest and mortality piece there. So that just kind of shows, not much going on up through mid-August, and then it starts picking up right in that last week of August, and peaking out around early mid-September, and then starts dropping off again. That's the Warrior Rock to Bonneville section, and that is 6-year average. I should say all of them are 6-year average, and so 2016 to 2021. And then I think we probably somehow I put these in the wrong order. Should have gone over this one previously, but anyways, this is Tongue Point to Warrior Rock, so moving back downriver. You can kind of see through August 10th to 15th, pretty low chinook catch per day, and then it starts increasing and really, peaks out slightly ahead of the Warrior to Bonneville section around, September 10th or so, right in that window, and then starts dropping off again. But just kind of showing this, we do anticipate there's a correlation on Thule impacts to chinook catch per day. So the next section here is our non-target handle and recreational fisheries. We've brought this up in past North of Falcons when we've seen really high catches of chinook when we've been closed for coho fishing or even steelhead. Some additional catches there when we're closed. I'm trying to basically just have a coho only fishery, for example. So, and really the focus is really just the high chinook handle. I should be extra clear about that part. That's really where it's at. We just, it's something we have to be mindful of because we definitely are going to have limited chinook ESA impacts to work with this year. So this is kind of a historical perspective. In 2019, the lower Columbia River remained open for hatchery, coho, and chinook retention closed. But we saw a big handle of non-target fish. Almost 53% of all salmonids were being released during that window. Based on the low coho forecast in 2020, we closed all salmonid angling when chinook was closed. That definitely helped there. So I guess, a consideration for the high Coho forecast, which is largely like very similar to last year's actual return of Coho, warrants discussion on which approach to take this year for the lower Columbia River rec fisheries, where the non-target handle has been pretty high. So that's this kind of layout. I guess kind of to take it home, we are definitely constrained by lower river hatchery tules. We will have to be mindful of the bright catches and exploitation rate, especially for pre-update, see where we land on the run size, because it's, we're 230,000 and triggers 200,000. So we've seen that a drop that could drop below that, but I think we have a pretty, ocean conditions a little bit better. So there's a few things that kind of point to, not being as concerned, but still being very mindful of the bright return. So our tule impact will be, our tule rate impacts will be, is a key consideration for setting any lower river rec fishery, Louis 10, Tongue Point to Warrior, and Warrior to Bonneville. So I want to just leave with that for there. And so we're looking for additional concepts for consideration for staff to pull together and to come back with a couple options at North Falcon number 1. And that's where we, we'll dial it down into one option. So this is in river focused. So I pretty much laid it all out there. I think the main session laid it out there as well. So with that, I'm going to move over to the tributary handout, and then we can take questions. So Bryce might give me a second to pull that file up. So 1 second.
Thanks, Ryan. Our approach here is Josua and Matt are going to walk us through that document once you get it pulled up. And I think we're going to start with Josua and go from there.
Okay, I think I got it pulled up. I just confirmation from Region 5 staff that it is presenting. Okay, floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everybody. My name is Josua Halawatz. I'm the WDFW Region 5 District 10 fisheries biologist. The basins of emphasis for me are the Lewis and Cowlitz. I'm going to be working with Matt Gardner, who's our other district fisheries bio, to introduce our Lower Columbia tributary fisheries recommendations. And these fall recommendations are based on our anticipated fall Chinook and Coho returns, as we've been talking about today. We've taken into account estimated harvest, broodstock collection goals, reintroduction opportunity, and all those other factors. While many tributaries are going to remain under our normal rule set, there's several that are we're recommending some modifications. And so starting downriver, we'll start with the Cowlitz. The current rule is a daily limit of 6. Up to 3 adults may be retained, and that's hatchery Coho only. But what we're doing is recommending up to 3 adults may be retained, of which 1 may be a Chinook. So those would be hatchery Chinook or Coho only. And then for the Lewis, so the Lewis has 2 fall season sessions, essentially, August 1 through September 30th. And then October 1 to December 31st. And so the current season for the August 1 to September 30th is for 3 adults, up to 3 adults, of which 2 may be Chinook. Those were typically hatchery fish. What we're recommending is that for that early period of August 1 to September 30th, 3 adults may be retained, of which 3 may be Chinook. So that would be either hatchery Coho or hatchery Chinook. And then the later period would be the regular rule of any 2 Chinook, and that'd be from October 1 to December 31st. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt so that he can discuss our other trib recommendations. So thanks.
All right. Thanks, Josua. Yeah, as
as he mentioned, Matt Gardner, the District 9 fish biologist with Washington Fish and Wildlife. Yeah, I'm just going to start off here again with the Washougal, similar rule to the others, where obviously we have a daily limit 6, right? That's the total of adults and jacks, and then within that we have a adult portion. And so currently in the Washougal, we have a 3 adult limit with a max of 1 chinook, based on the expected returns and sort of all the other considerations that Josua mentioned earlier. This year we're proposing to move that limit up to 2 for chinook, to account for that. So that's the Washougal rule. Moving down there a bit to Canvas Slough. Yeah, so currently we are proposing to align the rules in Canvas Slough with the main stem Columbia River. Presently, there's sort of a salmon rule there that allows for the slough follows the most liberal rule of either the Washougal or the main stem, and there's also similarly some game fish rules follow the main stem as well. And so it creates a bit of confusion for our enforcement staff, as well as our customer service staff that sort of field questions on interpretation in season. And so I think here we're proposing to just align the Canvas Slough rules with the main stem Columbia, but retain 2 provisions there. One that allows for Oregon anglers to fish in that area from a floating device. And second is that in the August through December 31st period, it would continue to allow for the use of 2-pole with a 2-pole endorsement in that area. So we're hoping to just provide a little bit more clarification and straightforward, rules for this area. Additionally, we would also kind of look into pursuing a unique catch record card code for Washington catch record card code for anglers to use for that area. That would help us sort of better understand the harvest and track, just harvest in that area. So if we can bump down a little bit on the document. Okay, and then one last thing to note on that Canvas Slough rule. At times there have been needs with broodstock collection in the Washougal, or I think for main stem considerations last year, I believe that Canvas Slough stayed closed to account for LRH potential impacts there. So we still would have the ability to manage that section through emergency rule with main stem rulemaking. And I guess that is another consideration to note, just that the Canvas Slough would follow either the pamphlet main stem rules or the effective emergency rule, whichever is in place. Okay, moving on to the Wind River. Currently in the Wind River, the fall, so basically from July through October, we currently have a salmon limit that's 6 fish up to 2, either Hatchery Coho or Hatchery Chinook. Similar to Canvas Slough in a previous, several years ago in the pamphlet, we had another similar rule that allowed to adopt either the most liberal rule of the adjacent main stem or the wind. That rule was removed during our rule simplification effort in 2017. But there has been some interest in kind of sort of moving back to a similar rule where sort of there would be aspects of non-mark select harvest in the Wind River. And so this is the area outside of the Highway 14 bridge. We're sort of looking at a phased approach to this rule. And so last year we were able to do a little bit of the enhanced creel effort, or at least effort counts, to document the extent of the fishery. I think a lot of that revealed it's somewhat smaller fishery than some of the others in the region. And so I think we're looking at taking it a step further this year. And at least in the October period, kind of moving toward that ability for retention of unmarked chinook. Again, I want to point out that we're sort of working through the process of pursuing resources to do improved creel there as well, so we could better monitor that fishery through the fall period. And also with staff, we think that potentially any tules, wild Wind River tules would be out of that area, had moved through that area during that October time period. So the proposal is presented there, and again, just contingent upon our ability to get those resources this fall. So if you want to move on. Okay, and then additionally, just want to highlight a couple areas here where we're not proposing to make any season or limit changes to what we currently have. So those would include the Allocations, sort of the Toutle, North Fork Toutle, Green River complex, the South Fork Toutle, and the Kalama River. I think we feel that the anticipated returns and there's other considerations, broodstock collection, have us in a pretty good spot with the regulations we have. So just kind of wanted to present those as our current rule package. And we'll continue down to the review some of these steelhead regulations. So yeah, as we have, I think in similar to what we've been sort of using for the past 3 years, I think in the past 2, they've been actually a bit more restrictive. Again, we're just kind of reviewing the steelhead rules we have in some of the lower reaches of areas above and below Bonneville Dam. So in reaches of the Cowles, Kalama, and Lewis rivers below Bonneville, we've had night closures from July through September, as well as just having 1 fish limits in July and September, and then full steelhead fishing closures in August. And then in the areas above Bonneville Dam, those being Wind River, lower reaches of Wind River, Drano Lake, the Little White Salmon River rather, and the Klickitat, and those lower reaches as well. If we can drop down maybe to page 2 or the next page. Yeah, if we can continue there. So yeah, that just kind of highlights the rules there. So those are closed to night angling July through October 31, and full steelhead fishing closures July through October 31. And then maybe one area that of Drano Lake that we're interested in just soliciting some public comment on, just to recap sort of management last year. We had the same rules as we detailed above, and at this time we're not proposing anything additional to those. As we moved through the 21 season, we did have take some boat closure approaches, and then ultimately move to angling closures in this sub area of Drano Lake to address some violations of the steelhead closure. We're going to move down a little bit. Yep, thank you. Yeah, so at this time, I think we just want to maybe get some feedback from anglers and solicit any input that might be out there for this area. As you mentioned, there's a commission. We'll be reviewing the cold water refugia document later this week, and I think any additional input that we receive from the public is always helpful in any potential management. So leaving that option open for this year. So that's it for the trim section. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to pull back the other handout, so give me 1 second. But I do want to check in with other staff. So Tucker and Jimmy, Kyle, anyone else that has anything else I want to emphasize or remind our constituents that are on the line before we break into questions, comments, all that, which we have, which we're doing well on time. So it looks like we'll have more than 30 minutes for that, which is good to see. So just checking in with Tucker, Jimmy, or Kyle, anyone else that, or John, to remind folks as we move forward through this.
Nothing for me right now, Ryan.
Nothing for me right now, Ryan. Thanks.
Yeah, likewise from me. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, this is John. I'd like to get to public comment. Excuse me.
Perfect. I think we're there then. So everyone go ahead. I'm going to keep this handout on in case we need to reference anything. But go ahead and throw your hand up if you know how, or provide your name and I'll add you to our speaking list and go that way. So, and then I'll start mentioning who's on the list in a second once I get my screen all laid out. I do want to make note that I wasn't able to get back to David Moskowitz, so I think I have to confirm that you're on, David, but if you are, I do have you first on the list, and then I have Liz added now. Then Butch. And Harry. And if you don't have a way to raise your hand, you can provide your state your name. And if you're muted on your phone, you can hit *6 to unmute. And then Steve. All right, let's get started with that. So I can't tell, I haven't seen if David Moskowitz is on, but I have Jim Fowler added while I can. But David, I'm just going to see if you're here. But if so, I'm just kind of pulling you forward from the last meeting or last breakout or the main session.
Hey, Ryan, make sure you get Robert Moxley down, if you would, please. I was on mute. Thanks.
Yep, I have you, Robert.
Okay.
I'm not seeing David Moskowitz on, so I'll maybe come back later if he gets back on. So, I think Liz, you were up first then.
Hey, yeah. Thanks for that. Liz, good. I was like, I don't have my.
Oh, this is Liz Perkin from Native Fish Society. So thanks so much for the presentation and providing us with a chance to give some feedback too. I think, I echo some of what David Moskowitz said previously. And I think something that I'd like to focus in on that was brought up here is around the steelhead angling closures. We have some concern about, how they're actually going to be effective. If you're allowing chinook angling, then, how can you actually respond to and enforce those closures on steelhead angling? And so I know that, that's not necessarily exactly in your purview, and it's I know like you're trying to do the best you can to manage these complex different stocks, but I don't know, like I think, as far as Drano Lake, we'd definitely be supportive of having full closure there to make that easier to enforce the steelhead closure. But if you have any, ideas about how we might do a better job enforcing those steelhead closures when fishing for chinook and coho is open, I'd love to hear about those ideas.
Thank you, Liz. Without diving too deep into that, some of that's definitely an enforcement question. I don't think we have any enforcement on some, but largely we stay in communication on any issues we see. We have Creel staff out there. We have information on, so enforcement can respond to just to respond as necessary, but they are, patrolling and all that as their schedule permits and where they're at. I guess also to note, so then we, as last year is a good example of us modifying in season and responding to an enforcement issue within Drano Lake and creating that sub-area angling closure. So that's one example. I think largely in the main stem, what we've seen through our impact assessment is that the handle of steelhead goes dramatically down when you're closed to steelhead retention. But I think one element of what we have on the table for our salmon fishery consideration is for above tongue point. When chinook retention closes, we would just, I think one thing that's on the table is we would consider closing all salmon angling, which would include steelhead as well. But yeah, it's obviously a challenge to prove someone, is targeting steelhead that's an enforcement question. It's not a fishery management question, I guess, but we do tally up the total impacts collectively. So I guess that's my long-winded answer to your question, and we can circle back offline if there's more details as well, but I hope that helps some. Staff, just checking staff, anything else to add to that? Or if I don't hear anything, I'll assume I covered it.
Hey, Ryan, just want to jump in quick. One follow-up on just the monitoring. I think I forgot to mention this, but similar to Wind River, we are working through sort of discussion of how to have enhanced creel in Drano Lake this year, and looking at a sort of different design or making some design improvements there. So yeah, that's just more continued, I think, to get a better idea of the sub area as well. So
that's helpful. Thank you. All right, I'm going to move on. I also saw a couple hands go up. I got Robert Kratzner, you're on, and then Jesse Bassler, so just acknowledging that you're on the list. So next up we have, I believe, Butch, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, interesting conversation this morning out in the public conversation. Butch Smith, President of Waco Charter Association, Porterville Waco Chairman on the PFMC Council, and a few other boards, and also a Southern panelist on the Pacific Salmon Treaty member. I find it ironic that here we are now, potentially starting another race war between sport groups and ocean versus in river. But I think some things were omitted today in the presentation. I could have missed it because I was on my phone and went to computer. But south of Falcon is in the Thule business too, more than ever. A modeling error was found out a couple of years ago. So you want to add that sport fisheries and that commercial fisheries to the Thule pie. It's just not north of Falcon, but including that, you have a broad base of user groups from, almost the California border clear up to Neah Bay and then up into Canada, in Southeast Alaska, including tribes. And so it's just not taking from one to make the other whole. It's taking from everybody. So I'd be interested in those user groups' opinion of this idea too. And I remind, last year, off the Ocean Area 1 or the Columbia River, we seemed to have a lot of industry boats from Oregon come out and help us in the ocean, and that was great. And a lot of private boats, and that's all what we like to see down here in the summertime. But for reference, Ocean Area 1's Chinook guideline was 84 to 85% taken. That's pretty darn close in any guideline of close to closing. And so, in fact, if we wouldn't have had a storm at our right time, it probably would have happened a lot earlier than the ocean closed down last year. So that's one thing, and I think that might be a 0.1% Thule savings into the river. That's maybe 3/4 of a day, or maybe even half a day on the current fishing power that's going on there. I don't know how you deal with the fishing power. I know that Oregon has room for production for Thules on the Oregon side that they're not currently using. Maybe that should be looking into that rather than trying to steal from someone else or take from someone else. We look at making the pie bigger. We just lost a couple tule, or going to lose a couple million tule production on the Washington side, which is not going to add to the issue. So I guess we can sit in this room and for now and a few years to come and fight this thing. Is the solution is there's not enough fish for a ever growing industry, and then I also wonder, NOAA has a kind of new directive and setting guidelines and stuff, and then adding a buffer. I'm wondering if you didn't have, this kind of ocean bank account that you've used to save your bacon for more than a few years in a row, to make sure we don't go over that ESA impact, what Jeremy, or not Jeremy, but NOAA Fisheries would come in and do an ad for a buffer on top of what the current buffer is. And that can be dangerous. So I think there's a lot of things to think about. There's a lot of people that use the ocean chinook things, and we set up our seasons, for a season length, and a 3-week blowout fisheries, and then move somewhere else. Like to remind people that you just don't put charter boats and charter offices and restaurants and bait shops and all that stuff that everybody likes to use when they come down to the lower river on trailers and move them to the next fishery. And I know there's plenty of sport boats by being a port commissioner that close their eyes and go past buoy 10 to fish in the ocean. And I know we had a big recreational contingency fishing out in the ocean and just having a great time. So, there's a lot of solutions rather than I guess the moving the gill netters around or trying to get those, whatever's trying to be done is not panning out so well for impacts. And so I guess the next target is the ocean, but thinking that way is never works so well. It ends up for years of fighting and battling, and we love that we're able to slip the unused impacts into the river so they can be used at some point in time. But there's a lot more people fingers in the pie of those tules out in the ocean than once was thought. And so I just wanted to bring that up. Love to hear everybody's comments. I thought we were here to work on a buoy 10 fisheries, but I guess it doesn't look like we're going to do that right now. So anyway, just some comments coming from my perspective, and thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Butch. I'm going to move down the list, and I saw Bill Monroe. Well, don't know if your hand's still up. I'll check back in with you at the end, Bill Monroe Jr. But I'm going to move on to Harry Barber. You're up next.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for the opportunity. Let me start with summer chinook. I guess I would oppose we would oppose the delayed start. Catch rates are very, very dependent on water temperature. And if you delay it a week, you may not get your allocation by July 31st. We've seen very, very low rates in that second, third week of July and fourth week of July. So I think what we did last year makes a lot of sense, even though it closed July 6th. It worked out very well because we had impacts on spring chinook remaining, and I think we opened the spring chinook extension on June 1st, ran that to June 15th, and then had summer chinook start on the 16th. So we had almost a month of continuous fishing for chinook, which I think was wonderful, and it lets people plan once you make the decision on springers. So those are my comments on summer chinook. Tule impacts, I know that's a tough nut. You look at the graphs that you presented, and I guess I suggest you need to hunt where the ducks are, and the graphs tell you where the ducks are. I won't get into any specifics. I think you're much more adept at deciding how to address those impacts. Steelhead, I did not see a proposed steelhead season, and I'd be curious what you're thinking for the Lower Columbia. I think last year we had sometime in June, July, and it closed August 1st. I think we've done that for a couple of years. So I'd be curious what you're looking at for steelhead. Moving to Drano Lake, pretty sympathetic to what David Moskowitz and the group are saying. Oregon has been very aggressive with the cold water refugia closures. I think I would support closing that area that you call it area under consideration, which expands the steelhead closure. Liz made some comments on gear. It's a tough situation up there because if it's open for salmon and not open for steelhead, you still get folks out there, and I don't want to pick on fly fishers, but you can see fly fishers out there in their belly boats and hooking steelhead after steelhead after steelhead after steelhead. So I know the department has been reticent in the past to consider gear restrictions. And I don't know that it makes a lot of sense. So that's why I kind of vote to take the expanded closure, and that reduces the area where steelhead fishing can be intensive, even when it's closed, because they can say, "Well, I'm fishing for chinook." Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Appreciate your fishery input there. Maybe I'll jump in and I'll pass it off to Tucker. He might have something to say, but summer chinook got that comment in. I think the question really that I think I can answer is we indirectly did kind of lay out that last year's preseason approach is pretty much where our what we're considering moving into this year. So basically Lower River August 1st closures, and above the Dalles, I think it was September 1st. So limited harvest opportunity, but largely closed to steelhead retention for the rest of the year in the main stem. Tucker, anything else to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna add on top of that. So I think main stem steelhead proposals will be really similar to last year, including those thermal angling sanctuaries on the Oregon side. Just to add that, last year, including for the last several years, steelhead impacts have, the limits are very low in the main stem, and the actual impacts have been a fraction of the allowed. So, running about half of the allowed, I think. So, I think the aggressive actions we've been taking, have been working. We haven't been really very close to the allowed. So I think our initial thought process would be, in the main stem to follow what we've been doing with those aggressive actions, reduced bag limits, expanded roll-in closures, and the thermal angling sanctuaries on the Oregon side. So thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Tucker. And again, thanks, Harry. Steve Watrous, you're up next.
Thanks, Ryan. For starting off with the main stem, you had a bunch of sub bullets up there. I know you guys have got nothing better to do than model just for us guys, but I'd like to see your best guess results, what each one of those would do to us before actually commenting on them, because I suspect that the old way of doing business the last few years isn't going to yield anything close to what we had preseason last year. So that would be my request on that. As far as the tributaries go, I'd like to make a couple of comments on the Camas Slough. One of them says, one of the reasons for making these changes says that it would be provide clarity for anglers, fishery managers, enforcement officers, and agency staff. I'd like to point out to the young people that are in your office now that the basis behind making that original change in the slough to make it the more liberal of the two areas was, number one, was to harvest hatchery tulies in the Washougal, headed for the Washougal. Number two was to provide clarity for anglers, fishery managers, enforcement officers, and agency staff. And now we're saying we're going to eliminate that for that very reason. Well, I don't know if they've talked to enforcement, but enforcement was part of the major push back when we changed that before. So I'd like to see this revisited before we even consider making any changes. I do wholeheartedly endorse establishing a unique Columbia River catch code for this area. That's long past due. It's been needed forever. And I would encourage Oregon to do the same, because if I'm not mistaken, they do not have a unique catch code area for that area. And then finally on the Camas Slough, the wording in the box, it's so ambiguous that it's going to raise more questions than it answers. If you go back and take a look at both the pamphlet and the fishing app that the department has out, the rules and regulations for that area are very clearly defined, easy to understand, and easy to interpret. If you look at these ones that are in the box, they're completely the opposite. So I would strongly urge that wording be revisited as well, and see if you decide to go ahead with this proposal, which I urge you to hold off on and think about it a little bit more, that you can make the wording such that people can understand it. Question on Drano. Am I to understand that additional closure is only a partial part of the year and is not year round? Am I interpreting that correct?
Yeah, so maybe I'll let staff jump in on that last question. I have your comments for Camas Slough down. I think that's the intention of bringing the trib package in now, as allows us to regroup for April 1st.
Okay.
Yep, and I think so. Checking with them, and I guess I want to just check in with Jimmy and Q on these bullet points here of fall season, what those mean. Feel free to jump in, but I've
also got a comment on Wind River. Do you want that now, or do you want me to wait?
Go ahead and make that now. Sorry.
Okay. I appreciate the fact that staff is starting to address the issue up there, but I have several comments on that as well. And please jump in and correct me if any of the things I say are incorrect here, because I'm going by information that I have obtained through reliable sources. And one is that apparently there's a long history of intensive spawning surveys up there in the Wind River. And I would suggest that what we do up there is, when using those spawning surveys, which should be readily available, we should know when those tules hit the spawning grounds up there on the Wind. And I would think that would be a good starting point for reopening down there in the so-called bubble to the most liberal of the two regulations. And then we could work backwards from there and piggyback that on top of increased and more intensive creel surveys. There's a precedent for that. You've been doing that in the Lewis for quite some time now. So, I'd really like to see that happen. Anyway, I think that's it.
Yeah, no, thanks. Before staff jump in, I guess I just want to acknowledge I'm looking at the speaking list and quarter till 1, and just asking everyone to keep comments somewhat brief, and maybe staff won't be able to answer everything now. We can definitely follow up on a lot of the questions, and also we're taking these to answer back at North Falcon number 2 on April 1st. So just we're going to keep that in mind as we move forward. Quick check in with Region 5. Can you clarify the Drano question if you heard it?
Hey, Ryan, yeah. So I don't think that right now we're not proposing any closure for the sub area of Drano. It would still just be the July through October 31st angling closure throughout the lake. with no additional. So salmon angling would still be open in the sub area.
Thank you. All right, I think we definitely captured all the other questions and definitely heard it, and we can go offline if needed more, but I think we'll bring a lot of that back to the next meeting. So seeing the head nods from Bryce, I think we're good there. So thanks, Steve, really appreciate it. I see Bill Monroe Jr.'s hand went up. I have you on, and Greg King as well, so just acknowledging that. And in a few minutes, I might have to close comments down, just heads up. So Jim Fowler, you're next.
Thanks, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Jim Fowler. I'm a fishing guide. I bought Sturgeon Paul's bait shop at the top of the boat ramp in Hammond. I've got a wholesale fish dealer's license, so I understand the commercial side a little bit too. One tool I didn't see in your in-river management package there is, should we maybe discuss annual unclipped Chinook limits in the Columbia in the fall to some degree? I don't know, how that would work. They sort of do something like that in Tillamook, but if we have this problem and we're constantly moving fish around, does it make sense to let guys harvest, say, 20 unclipped Chinook a year on their card? I don't know how that all would work. I would think that maybe, a couple a year, and that could spread out the effort of when people go and stuff. The other thing I do every year in August is I've got about a dozen people that camp on my property. And I can tell you that the sport fleet is so agile that, August 28th last year, Chinook was open. August 29th, it was closed, and my yard emptied out fast. And some of those guys went as far east as Hood River. So, you guys have a heck of a job to pull off here, because we catch them pretty fast now, and we're so agile that you close one area and we go to the next. So, I like the idea of trying to keep stuff open so that, especially in years when we've got 1 million coho, we can get at those hatchery fish. That's all I got right now. You guys got a lot to do, so thanks for the time.
All right. Appreciate that. I know we've looked in the past and haven't gone there due to some enforcement challenges, and most folks don't catch too many fish, but do acknowledge that we jotted it down, and we'll, come back later on that one. So I'm going to move down the list. Robert Moxley, you're next. Robert Moxley, are you there?
All right. So, yeah, the mute thing takes, maybe 20 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, yeah, as far as buoy 10 goes, and, the Longview fishery, I just don't see how we get a season, without a bunch of Mark Select. Not, and everybody that knows me knows that I've always been against the Mark Select aspect. For erroneous amount of reasons, but I don't know what to do. We're out of impacts. We're catching them faster. Staff models these fisheries, these fall lower river fisheries, and we never actually see them come to fruition. It's emergency closure after emergency closure. I would challenge the staff to actually propose a season that actually came to fruition, that actually closed when we said it would close. And I don't know how to do that. I mean, there's tools in the toolbox, but it just seems like, the one we keep reverting to is the Mark Select. And I mean, I appreciate what Butch says, and I agree with a lot of what Butch says, but, I question, why isn't there any Mark Select on Chinook in the ocean? Why aren't they fielding some of the pain? I get it. There's tule impacts that need to be used, in the ocean as well as the river. Why are we always the ones that, seem to take the burden to the extreme? I'd also like to bring up the Young's Bay fishery. I know that's mostly an Oregon thing, and I realize it's a commission thing, it needs to be brought up. There's no reason for that fishery to be shut down, that imaginary line that, tide's coming in real quick, someone gets a fish on, they don't pay attention, all of a sudden they're landing it inside of a no fishing zone that's imaginary for the most part. There's no, you just got to imagine where the line is, right? So it's a headache for enforcement. Statistically, SAB catch had increased once we closed it, and we never did a study in regards to what the recreational fleet catch was on those SABs prior to closing it. We just closed it for ideological reasons. So anyways, it would be nice if we took a look at that, Oregon. Other than that, I just, I don't know what to do. I mean, I'd love to bring some suggestions here, but I don't see how we get out of the Mark Select thing. I really don't. So, and I also, what took place in Longview this last year, that's a huge problem. Yeah, I don't think restricting gear is the right idea. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. We'll just come up with something else, to keep catching them. So the department would always be chasing their tail. Anyway, wish I had more options that the staff could look at, but probably like staff, I really don't know what the answer is. So thanks for the time.
Thanks, Robert. Tucker, anything there for you?
Ryan, I was just wondering, given the limited time, if I don't know how many people are left on your list, but maybe if there are folks we haven't heard from today, that we might go to them first.
Yeah.
If folks are okay with that.
Makes sense. I'll do that. I have a list. I'll go through it right now. And so I'm going to do a last call right now, just to not sure where we're going to land, but we're really watching that 1 o'clock time. So I've got Robert Kratzer down. I don't believe you've spoken. I've got Jesse Vassar down. You haven't spoken. I don't know if Billman Jr.'s on the list or not. I've seen the hand go up and down, but you did the just earlier. So you're put you down as a repeat. Greg King is new. I see a Jim Guest. I don't know who that is, but I'm thinking that's a new one as well. So that's what I have, Tucker. And then David Moskowitz at the end that we missed earlier, but also a repeat. So, and I didn't see any new hands go up. So I think we're going to go in the order of newbies and then for comments, and then we'll see where we're at on time for repeats. And you can definitely reach out to staff. We're definitely always available. So Robert Kratzer, you're up first.
Thanks, Ryan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hey, thanks. I guess I'm a fishing guide. Have been for a long time, but I'm more up in that Longview area. And, for a guy that doesn't have a charter boat license in Washington, I can't fish below Longview Bridge, so I don't go to Buoy 10. And for all the people that want to buy an Oregon license and go down there, that's great. But it seems like we keep getting cut back up in that area, that mid area, just time after time after time. It is a good concern when they have such a great Chinook fishery in Buoy 10, and then as soon as that closes, those people just transition up to the Longview area, and then all of a sudden we're closed pretty quick. And by even looking at even by charts, to really see Chinooks at Longview, very well until the 15th, maybe. By the 20th, it starts getting pretty good, and the next thing you know, we're shut down pretty fast. So I would kind of maybe try to look at how we can lengthen those fisheries out a little bit so that we can do that. One way is, as much as I don't like it, that like putting a bubble around those cold water refuge areas where the Chinooks seem to like to lay. That might be a way of keeping the fishery open a little longer, because obviously if you're at the mouth of the Cowlitz, within 400 yards of the mouth of the Cowlitz, there's 800 boats, and you go anywhere on either side of it, there's not very many. So I think maybe doing that to lengthen our season might be all right. I'm also a little concerned, even as a fisherman, I loved when I saw the one fish Chinook out of the Cowlitz. As a conservationist, I'm a little concerned. We keep talking about lower river tule stock, and here we are going to open a Chinook fishery in the Cowlitz. Even though it's a hatchery Chinook, how many wild fish are going to get injured or hurt in the process by guys choking them with eggs, hover fishing, and everything, and releasing a gob of fish to keep that one hatchery fish? So just kind of a thought. on that. And then the gentleman that talked about like the yearly limit stuff, that's something I've been talking about for a long time with the department, but don't seem to get anywhere. You know, we have 5 fish limits all over Alaska, all over. Tillamook's starting to do it. There's all kinds of places going to yearly limits. Your comment was that, you know, we don't see a lot of people catching too many fish. Well, I would argue the fact that those same people are the ones that aren't returning their cards. They don't turn in their cards, so you really don't have any record of how many they actually caught. And so it's a far greater number than it appears that you guys are seeing. So that's really all I have. Thank you very much for the time to talk. I'll be interested to see where this all falls out.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate the comments. I'm gonna keep us moving forward. So Jesse Vassar, you're up next.
Thanks, Ryan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. You know, unfortunately, you know, kind of whether you're an ocean fisherman, a commercial fisherman, or sport fisherman, we're all, you know, fighting for that same resource, and it isn't getting bigger. You know, I don't want to comment too much on these fisheries without kind of seeing what those models look like and some of that different stuff. But you know, I don't know anybody that goes out on the river looking to harvest a tule, you know. So, you know, one thing, what if we had some, you know, some more education requirements about what these tules are, identifying them. I know if you're a waterfowl hunter, you got to go through identification of species before you can get that license. I don't know how exactly that would work, but you know, again, at the dock, you hear a lot of people say, well, how do you know that's a tule? Yeah, I didn't think that's tule. How do you know? And I think some more education there would possibly help, you know, some of those things get released and maybe save some impacts there. So I'm going to wait to comment too much until I see some, you know, some of the models on these different fisheries and kind of go from there. But thank you guys for all you do.
Thanks, Jesse. I guess I can speak to one piece super fast, visually ID, and it's definitely, you pretty much need to be a fishery expert to really get down to the lower river hatchery tule stock call. So it's just a challenge. And keep in mind, there's Bonneville pool hatchery tules too. So there's 2 kinds of tules returning. And how do you identify lower river hatchery tule from a Bonneville pool hatchery tule? So that just adds additional challenges. And I guess for this year's return, we actually have more Bonneville pool hatchery tules returning than actually lower river hatchery tules. So all that in, it's quite complicated and a challenge, but definitely appreciate the thought. And thanks again for your thoughtful input there. I'm going to move us to Greg King. You're next.
Hey, Ryan, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for letting me have the opportunity today to speak. I want to remind everybody when PMFC sets seasons in the ocean that they're, as we heard Phil Anderson speak of, conservation first. And I know WDFW is conservation first too. So transferring those impacts to in-river would probably be robbing Peter to pay Paul. And that area 1, it closed early last season. So I'm not understanding why these guys want to try to rob Peter to pay Paul. Anyway, moving on to Buoy 10. I'd like to see Buoy 10 open August 1st till Labor Day like we tried to do every year. We never seem to do that. We always have it all broke up into, let's start the 15th and this and that. Let's start August 1st and let everybody have opportunity. If a guy wants to go out there and fish, let him go out there and fish. You know, that's the way I look at it. It's opportunity. As far as the tongue point to West Puget Island, I think we should initiate that again. That's going to save on impacts there. And now I want to go to this cold water refusion areas. I believe this is a bad thing to do at the mouth of the Cowlitz. You heard Robert Kratzer mention that there's 800 boats at the mouth of the Cowlitz at times. There's people, it is probably one of the best chinook fisheries there is once Buoy 10 closes. And to have the cold water refuge area will be an enforcement nightmare. It will be a loss for the communities of Longview, Kelso, and Rainier, Oregon. people just won't fish there anymore, and they won't spend their money in those towns, and they'll find other places to impact steelhead and on the river. So anyway, I will save the rest of my comments for later on, and I'll cut myself short. Thank you, Ryan and staff.
Thanks, Greg. I'm gonna jump down to, and I don't know who the last name is, it's Jim Guest. You had your hand up, so go ahead, Jim. Last call, if you had your hand up earlier, Jim Guest. That's definitely not your last name, but that's what it looks like on my end. Okay, I'm gonna call it there. We're at 1 o'clock. I really apologize to David Moskowitz and Bill Monroe Jr. You had your hands up earlier, but we just had to get everyone else's input. We do request that you send your email into any one of us staff, and we'll make sure the rest of the key staff are informed. We're definitely good at sharing information like that. Really want to appreciate everyone's time today. I wish it was in person, but we'll do that in the future. I should reiterate, though, the next meeting is still going to be held virtually, as we kind of already committed to that meeting platform for this year's process. And we look forward to any additional comments you have for structuring in river fisheries, given what we have to work around, largely Thule impacts. And with that, if you have any thoughts, get it to us fast as possible, because it takes a lot to model these out, and we'll bring back some options April 1st. And then their intent is to get to one option into PFMC too. Looking to staff, Tucker and other staff, any final comments? Tucker, are you there? I think you were ready to speak, but. I think we may have. I guess just looking to Kyle or any other staff, anything else that we may have missed, or just last check for staff.
Nothing else from me, Ryan. Great job getting everything organized today.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, this is John. Nothing much to add. I appreciate getting through the public comment. So it's good to hear from folks. Unfortunately, the situation isn't great. So, but we'll see what we can put together before the next meeting.
Yep. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate all your help today. Comments, thoughts, digesting this information, sharing it with others. It should be all located online. Also, WDFW on the North of Falcon site has a public comment piece you can provide information to. You can also reach out to staff, but that's more direct to contact an individual. So anyways, really appreciate everyone's time, and we look forward to April 1st. It will be April Fool's Day, but we will bring a real packet together then, some options based on some of the input we heard today. So with that, everyone.
Thanks again, staff.
Yeah. Thank you all. Stay safe. We'll be in touch.